Lots of people grew up hearing the same thing. Study, get a good job, receive your monthly salary, and over time your financial life will be sorted out. It seems logical, it seems safe, it seems like enough. But the truth is that in real life, a salary alone almost never builds wealth. A salary pays bills, keeps the household running, brings relief at the end of the month. But real wealth is born when what you earn starts to be used as a tool, not just as fuel to survive until the next paycheck. There are very clearly three paths to creating wealth. The first is entrepreneurship, where the person builds something of their own, sells, leads, takes risks, and multiplies gains through a business. The second is investment, where money stops sitting idle and starts working, producing new results. And the third is career, which many people underestimate, but which can be the starting point of an entire financial transformation in a life. And here is an important detail. Career is not the final destination of wealth. Career is the foundation. It is solid ground. It is the platform from which many smart people can launch to build assets. When a person develops their career well, they increase their income, strengthen their name, open doors, gain experience, improve their negotiation skills, and create conditions to start investing with greater force. In other words, a career may not be wealth itself, but it can be the machine that finances the construction of it. Think of someone who receives a salary and uses everything just to keep the month afloat. That person works hard, puts in effort, wakes up early, keeps hours, delivers results, but in the end remains stuck in the same cycle. Money comes in, money goes out, and almost nothing stays. Now think of another person who also has a job, also lives from a career, but sees their salary differently. They understand that every promotion, every raise, every new skill acquired can be a staircase, and each step of that staircase can bring them closer to something greater: financial freedom. That is why a well-developed career should not be seen only as a badge or a profession. It should be seen as an asset under construction. The more value you generate, the more value you can capture. The more competent you become, the more opportunities arise. The more strategic you are, the more your income can grow. And when that income grows with direction, discipline, and intelligence, it stops being just a salary. It begins to become a seed. That is the point that many people take years to understand. It is not that working is bad. It is not that having a career is small. The problem lies in depending forever solely on money that comes from direct effort without transforming part of that money into something that continues generating returns. A career, when well built, can be the beginning of that turning point. It can fund your studies, your reserve, your investments, your first assets, and even the projects that in the future will bring income without depending entirely on your hours. So, when we talk about creating wealth, we are talking about vision. We are talking about stopping looking at the salary as an end and starting to look at it as a beginning. The entrepreneur creates wealth with a business. The investor creates wealth with capital. And the career professional can create wealth by using their income, their reputation, and their evolution as a point of support. It is not about despising employment. It is about not limiting your life to a paycheck. Because in the end, those who understand this early discover a powerful truth. A career can pay for your life today, but if used with intelligence, it can also build your freedom tomorrow. Those who live from a career and want to build a stronger financial life need to understand one thing early on. Advantage does not appear by chance. It is built, and it almost always begins earlier than most people imagine. Many people spend years working on autopilot, just fulfilling tasks, waiting for someone to one day recognize their effort and reward everything. But growth rarely happens just because the person spent more time in the same place. Growth happens when there is intention, preparation, and movement. Starting early makes a difference precisely because of this. Not because the person needs to have everything figured out right at the start, but because every year counts. Every skill learned early is worth more. Every contact built early yields more. Every step taken with direction has time to mature. Those who understand this stop living their career as a sequence of identical days and begin to see it as a strategic construction. It is like planting a tree. Whoever plants today may not see the full shade tomorrow, but further down the road will have something solid, while whoever postponed the planting will still be waiting for the perfect moment that never came. Giving your best is also a principle that many people interpret the wrong way. It does not mean living exhausted, trying to impress everyone all the time. It means treating your own work with seriousness. It means being the kind of professional who delivers well, learns quickly, observes more than complains, and understands that every task, even the simplest one, can be a chance to show value. Because the truth is that important doors almost never open for those who do only the minimum. They open for those who transmit confidence, and confidence in the market is worth a great deal. When people look at you and think, this person gets things done, your name starts to circulate differently. Your work begins to be remembered. Your presence gains weight. And that matters because a career does not grow on hidden competence alone. There is no point in being good if no one notices. There is no point in knowing a lot and remaining invisible. In many cases, the professional is not stalled because they lack talent. They are stalled because they have not yet learned to transform talent into perceived value. That is where relevant certifications come in. They do not work miracles on their own, but they function as visible proof of preparation. In a competitive market, they help show that you studied, kept up to date, deepened your knowledge, and are taking your profession seriously. For many people, this kind of qualification is the detail that separates stagnation from advancement. Because when a better position comes along, a promotion, a bigger project, or an opportunity outside the usual environment, the question almost always arises, who is better prepared? And in that moment, whoever invested in themselves arrives stronger. But there is another point that many people take a long time to accept. Professional growth also depends on strategic networking. And that does not mean flattering anyone, faking friendships, or spending time trying to please influential people. It means building healthy, intelligent, and useful relationships with those on the same path or on complementary ones. It means being remembered. It means talking, learning, exchanging ideas, being present, and creating genuine connections with people who can open windows that you alone might take years to find. In practice, many opportunities do not arrive through advertisements. They arrive through referrals, memory, trust, and proximity. Someone remembers your name. Someone mentions a vacancy. Someone invites you to a project. Someone suggests you for a better role. That is how the game works in many environments. So visibility matters, credibility matters, access to the right people matters. Being competent in absolute silence and waiting for the world to discover it on its own is simply not enough. Imagine two professionals with the same talent. One studies, keeps up to date, delivers results, talks with people in the field, participates in important environments, and builds a solid reputation. The other does the work well but isolates themselves, does not invest in their own professional image, and believes that everything will happen naturally. Over time, the distance between the two begins to grow. Not necessarily because one was smarter, but because one understood early that a career is not just technical effort. It is also positioning. In the end, those who live from a career need to stop acting like someone who merely occupies a position and start acting like someone who is building value in the market. Starting early, giving your best, pursuing certifications, and networking are not minor details. They are pillars. They are movements that increase your strength, your visibility, and your chances of earning more. And when that happens, a career stops being just survival. It begins to become a springboard. There is a mistake that keeps many people stuck for years without them realizing it. The person dedicates themselves to their profession, studies, learns the technical side, improves at what they do, gains experience, becomes good at their craft, but even so cannot transform all of that into wealth. And do you know why? Because knowing how to work is not the same as knowing how to earn money from your own value. That is a shift that changes everything. Many people think that mastering a profession is enough. It seems that if the person is excellent at what they do, the money will come naturally. But the real world does not always work that way. There are brilliant professionals who live exhausted, overloaded, and always chasing their bills. They know how to execute the work, but they have not learned to see the financial and commercial side of what they do. In other words, they know the profession, but they do not know the machine that transforms profession into assets. Think of a doctor. They may understand diagnosis, treatment, exams, clinical routine, and patient care. They may spend years studying, doing shifts, refining techniques, and accumulating experience. All of that has value, great value. But if they do not understand how to organize their income, how to better position their service, how to charge intelligently, how to structure growth, and how to transform part of what they earn into assets, they may continue working a great deal and building less wealth than they could. The same applies to a lawyer. They may know laws, processes, contracts, deadlines, appeals, and legal strategies with great competence. They may be respected for their technical ability. But if they do not know how to build authority, attract better opportunities, create strong professional relationships, manage cash flow, and use income to build assets, they will continue to be simply someone very good at solving other people's problems, without truly resolving their own wealth construction. This also happens with accountants, teachers, and many other professions. An accountant may know how to read numbers, organize businesses, calculate taxes, and advise clients, yet still fail to apply in their own life the financial principles they master on paper. A teacher may have deep knowledge, transform the minds of hundreds of people, communicate ideas with clarity, and carry enormous value, yet continue to earn little because they never learned to better package that knowledge, expand their reach, or create new income streams from their own experience. This is a decisive point. Technical competence and financial prosperity are not the same thing. A person can be excellent at what they do and still be financially stalled, because wealth does not depend only on what you know how to do with your hands or your mind. It also depends on what you know how to do with what you earn. It depends on knowing how to negotiate. It depends on understanding perceived value. It depends on positioning. It depends on understanding that in the market, having content is not enough. You must transform content into economic results. It is like someone who has a source of clean water but has not built channels to carry that water anywhere. The source exists, the quality exists, the value exists, but without structure, without direction, and without commercial intelligence, it does not multiply. It stays limited. It stays small. It stays trapped. That is why those who want to grow through their career need to start thinking as both a professional and a strategist. They need to look at themselves and ask, in what way does my competence generate income? In what way can that income grow? What am I delivering that the market actually perceives? Am I just working, or am I building value? Am I being paid for my time, or am I increasing my reach, my relevance, and my capacity to earn more? These questions are uncomfortable, but they set you free, because the professional who understands the financial side of their career stops living only in execution mode. They begin to observe where they are losing money, where they are undervalued, where they are delivering too much and receiving too little, where they need to improve their presentation, their negotiation, their reputation, and their strategy. They realize that being good is not enough. You need to be well positioned. Working hard is not enough. The work needs to produce greater fruits. And when that understanding matures, something changes inside. The person stops seeing themselves only as someone who has a profession. They start seeing themselves as someone who manages an asset called a career. And that asset needs to be strengthened, valued, and used with intelligence. In the end, the difference between simply living from a craft and transforming that craft into wealth lies precisely there. An ordinary professional works to receive. A strategic professional works, grows, organizes, invests, and converts competence into asset building. They understand that their knowledge cannot remain trapped in the service rendered on a given day. It needs to become scale, reserve, investment, opportunity, and security. Because whoever masters only the profession knows how to perform a function, but whoever also masters the financial and commercial side of their career truly begins to build wealth. Now we arrive at a point that separates those who merely earn money from those who begin to build real protection, the culture of saving. Many people work hard their entire lives, but always live on the edge. They receive, pay, rush, fix something here, put out a fire there, and at the end of the month, almost nothing is left. The problem is that living this way creates a false sense of normality. The person becomes so accustomed to chasing expenses that they start to believe this is simply how life is. But it is not. That is vulnerability disguised as routine. Whoever does not save lives, exposed. It only takes a small, unexpected event for the ground to shake. A health problem, an unexpected repair, a drop in income, a forgotten bill, a change at work, a delay, a household emergency. These things happen to everyone. The difference is that some people feel the blow, take a deep breath and resolve it. Others fall into despair because any problem meets a financial life that is already weakened. That is why building a culture of saving is so important. We are not talking here about storing money for the sake of it. We are talking about creating a habit that protects your dignity, your peace, and your ability to keep moving forward even when life tightens. Because when a person has no reserve, they lose the power to choose. They accept what they did not want to accept. They endure what they should not have to endure. They take on bad debts. They make decisions in a hurry, and almost always end up paying more for it, in money and in emotional wear. The truth is simple. Every income that enters your life already has destinations competing for that money. One part goes to the past. And what is the past? It is the bills that were already born, installments made before, commitments assumed, old debts, obligations that came from previous decisions. The past demands payment, and it demands it without asking permission. Another part goes to the present. These are the expenses of life right now. Food, transportation, rent, water, electricity, internet, school, medicine, household maintenance, small daily urgencies. The present consumes with force because life does not stop and commitments keep arriving. But there is a third destination, and it is exactly this one that many people ignore: the future. The future also needs to receive its share, and when it does not, it demands payment later in a much harsher way. Because the money you do not set aside today for protection and growth ends up turning into pressure tomorrow. A future without preparation becomes fear, becomes dependency, becomes improvisation, becomes that anguishing feeling of working so hard and still always being one step from hardship. That is why dividing income between past, present, and future is not financial fussiness. It is a rule of intelligent survival. Imagine a person who receives their salary and thinks only about what they need to pay right now. They organize bills, cover expenses, buy what is missing, and end the month relieved to have made it through once again. At first glance, it seems like responsibility. But if the future received nothing, that account is not complete. Because living putting out fires is not stability, it is just a well-organized rush. Now imagine another person with the same income or even a similar one who understands this principle. They also pay what needs to be paid. They also take care of the household. They also honor their commitments. But before considering the money fully available, they set a portion aside for tomorrow. That portion does not enter into the negotiation of impulse, haste, or emotional spending. It already has a destination. It represents protection. It represents vision. It represents maturity. And this habit, repeated over months and years, completely changes the course of a life. Because saving creates internal structure. It teaches limits. It teaches priorities. It teaches that not everything that comes in can go out. It teaches that money needs to obey a plan and not the mood of the moment. Gradually, the person stops being someone who merely receives and becomes someone who manages. And that seems small at the beginning, but it is enormous over the long term. Whoever develops a culture of saving begins to build something invisible from the outside, but extraordinarily powerful from the inside: security. Not the arrogant security of someone who thinks nothing will ever go wrong, but the calm security of someone who knows that if something does happen, they will not be completely unprotected. In the end, saving is a form of respect for your own future. It is telling yourself, I will not live carelessly. It is deciding that the money that enters your life will not serve only to keep the present standing, but also to strengthen what comes next. Because whoever sets nothing aside for the future ends up dominated by the past and crushed by the present. But whoever builds a culture of saving begins to construct a less fragile, more prepared, and much stronger life. We now arrive at one of the most practical and most transformative decisions in an entire financial life: learning to save a fixed portion of everything that comes in, not a leftover, not what remains at the end of the month, because almost nothing ever remains, not what is left over after all the desires, all the urgencies, and all the impulses. We are talking about consciously setting aside from the very beginning a portion of income to build protection. And the recommendation is clear: save between 10% and 20% of everything you earn. It may sound simple when said like that, but in practice, it changes the entire logic of financial life. Most people think in the following way: first I earn, then I pay everything, then I see if there is anything left to save. The problem is that by the time that then arrives, the money has already disappeared. There was always one more bill, one more need, one more exception, one more justification. And so time passes. 1 month becomes 1 year, 1 year becomes 5. And the person realizes, with a heavy feeling in their chest, that they worked a great deal but built little protection. That is why saving 10% to 20% is not a minor detail. It is a change of posture. It is the moment in which you say, before handing all my money over to the world, I will reserve a portion to strengthen my own life. That is financial maturity. That is vision. That is beginning to treat the future as a commitment and not as a distant idea. Think of someone who earns and immediately sets a portion aside. Even if it seems small at the beginning, this decision creates a new mental structure. The person stops seeing the full salary as available money and begins to see only a part of it for spending. That is powerful because it forces life to fit within a more intelligent plan. Gradually, the habit gains strength, and what before seemed like sacrifice begins to feel like relief. But saving for the sake of saving is not enough either. The goal of this phase is to build a financial reserve capable of sustaining life for 6 to 8 months. And here is the reason. Life does not give notice when it is about to tighten. Nobody receives an elegant invitation saying that a crisis will soon arrive. The unexpected simply comes. Sometimes it arrives in the form of job loss, sometimes in the form of a drop in income. Sometimes it appears as a health problem, a family emergency, an unexpected change, a bad spell in the market, or some situation that demands time, money, and calm all at once. And whoever has no reserve suffers twice. They suffer from the problem and they suffer from the lack of preparation. That is exactly what financially destroys so many people. It is not just the size of the problem. Many times, it is the absence of a cushion. When there is no reserve, any stumble becomes a hard fall. An unexpected expense goes on a credit card. The card turns into interest. Interest turns into delay. Delay turns into anxiety. Anxiety leads to bad decisions. And without realizing it, the person falls into a hole that started with something that could have been just a setback. Now imagine another scenario. Imagine someone who spent months, perhaps years, building their reserve with patience. That person did not get rich overnight. They did not win a fortune. There was no miracle. They simply respected a straightforward principle. Every income deserves a portion saved. Over time, they managed to build the equivalent of 6 to 8 months of expenses. Then, when life tightened, they did not panic immediately. They had breathing room, they had time, they had space to think. And time in difficult moments is worth gold. With a reserve, the person does not need to accept the first bad solution that appears. They do not need to take on expensive debt out of desperation. They do not need to sell something important at any price. They do not need to collapse because the salary was delayed, the contract ended, or the situation went out of control for a period. The reserve does not eliminate the pain of the problem, but it prevents the problem from also stripping away the person's stability. That is why this reserve should not be seen as idle money. It is living protection. It is a shield. It is a silent wall being built month after month, without noise, without applause, without any appearance of grandeur, yet with an enormous power to preserve your life when the unexpected arrives. And notice how this changes even the way a person walks through life. Whoever has no reserve lives under constant tension. Any piece of news is frightening. Any delay is worrying. Any unusual expense becomes a threat. But whoever builds this foundation begins to breathe differently. Not because life became perfect, but because they are no longer entirely at the mercy of every wind. Saving 10% to 20% of all income, therefore, is not merely a mathematical guideline. It is a decision of emotional, family, and strategic protection. It is the difference between always living on the edge and beginning to build firmness. It is the difference between being pushed around by events and having the ability to face them with greater dignity. At the beginning, it may feel slow. It may feel like something is lacking. The effort may seem great, but what is being built is not just an amount. It is resilience. It is freedom of choice. It is peace. It is the ability to pass through difficult periods without being destroyed by them. Because in the end, the reserve does not exist to impress anyone. It exists to prevent a bad moment from bringing down your entire life. Life does not move in a straight line. That may be one of the most important facts a person can understand when thinking about money. There are phases of growth, phases of calm, phases of hardship, phases of rebuilding. There are months when everything seems to flow, work is productive, the bills align, and the feeling is one of stability. But there are also periods when things change without asking permission. And it is precisely for this reason that saving money is not a luxury. It is protection. Many people treat a reserve as something optional, almost like a privilege reserved for those who are already very well off. But that is a dangerous mistake. In truth, whoever most needs protection is precisely whoever is still building. Because when life enters a difficult cycle, the absence of a reserve transforms a passing problem into a complete disaster. And the cycles come for everyone. Sometimes the company cuts costs, sometimes the market cools, sometimes an extra income disappears. Sometimes health requires a pause. Sometimes a mistake made in the past now demands its price. Sometimes a wrong decision, an unexpected change, or a family emergency throws everything into disarray at once. The question is not whether life will have moments of pressure. The question is how you will be when they arrive. Whoever has no reserve enters those periods like someone trying to cross a storm with no shelter. Every drop weighs more. Every piece of news is more frightening. Every difficulty seems larger than it really is, because there is no structure to absorb the impact. The person loses their job, and along with it, loses their footing. An emergency arises, and along with it comes fear. A bad phase appears, and instead of facing it with strategy, they react with despair. And despair almost always costs dearly. It leads to bad loans, to hasty decisions, to poorly made sales, to disadvantageous agreements, to choices driven not by logic, but by urgency. When a person is without a reserve, they do not choose the best path. They choose the path that is available in that minute. And many times that path resolves today, but compromises tomorrow even further. That is why saving cannot be seen as a whim. It is not something to do only when there is plenty left over. It is not a habit of the excessively cautious. It is not fear. It is prudence. It is understanding that real life has ups and downs, and that crossing those cycles with some protection makes all the difference between falling and getting back up, or falling and being swept away. Think of two people going through the same crisis. Both experience an unexpected loss of income, both feel concern, both need to revise their plans, but one of them has a reserve, the other does not. The first one suffers, of course, but still manages to breathe. They have a few months of breathing room. They can reorganize expenses. They can look for new opportunities with more calm. They can think. The other feels the blow in a far more violent way. Within a few days, fear is already mixed with pressure. Bills coming due, collections arriving, and that terrible feeling of being surrounded. Do you see the difference? The problem is the same, but the impact is not. The reserve does not prevent the crisis from existing. What it does is prevent the crisis from destroying everything around it. It works as a shock absorber. It holds the blow. It reduces the force of the impact. Without it, any mistake becomes an avalanche. With it, even a hard period can be faced with more firmness. And here there is a lesson worth gold. Financial stability is not living without problems. Financial stability is having the structure not to be consumed by them. Many people think that financial protection is something grand, distant, almost unattainable. But in practice, it begins with a simple and repeated decision. Save before life forces you to pay dearly for the absence of that habit. Because the money saved today may be exactly what prevents a crisis from becoming a tragedy tomorrow. Deep down, when a person saves money, they are not merely accumulating notes or numbers in an account. They are buying time. They are buying margin. They are buying the tranquility to think. They are buying the right not to be crushed by the first strong wind. And that matters because life happens. It changes. It surprises. It challenges. It tests. Without a reserve, any instability becomes a serious threat. With a reserve, the person still feels the weight of the moment, but does not completely lose the ability to respond. That is why saving is not a luxury. It is defense. It is care. It is intelligence. It is an act of respect for your own story, because nobody knows exactly when the next difficult phase will come, but whoever prepares beforehand does not need to be caught on their knees when it arrives. Many people make a silent mistake in their financial life. They believe that saving money and investing are exactly the same thing. They are not. And understanding this difference can completely change the course of a person who lives on a salary and truly wants to prosper. Saving is the beginning. Investing is the next step. Saving in this sense functions like the foundation of a house. It is not the beautiful roof, not the elegant window, not the part that catches the eye from outside. But without it, nothing holds. It is the base that gives firmness. It is the first secure ground where the construction of prosperity can begin. That is why, when it is said that saving is not investing, that does not diminish its importance. On the contrary, it shows that saving has a specific and indispensable function: to prepare the way. Because nobody invests consistently without first learning to set money aside. That is the central point. Before thinking about yield, applications, assets, and asset growth, the person needs to overcome a far more basic obstacle: getting out of the logic of receiving and spending everything. As long as income comes in and goes out without control, there is no capital to build anything. And without capital, the desire to invest remains just a good intention. It is like wanting to plant an orchard without seeds. First you must save. First you must gather. First you must form the value that later on can leave the state of protection and begin to work in pursuit of growth. Many people spend years saying they still do not invest because they earn too little, because they have not found the right opportunity, because they are waiting for a better moment, because they are still studying the subject. But in most cases, the problem comes before that. The problem is not a lack of opportunity, it is a lack of separation. It is a lack of discipline. It is a lack of a habit that transforms part of income into a resource available for the future. Whoever wants to prosper as a salaried professional needs to understand this clearly. The change does not begin when you find the perfect investment. The change begins when you decide that not all the money that comes in will be consumed. That is the true break, because until that moment, the person lives in a closed cycle. They work to earn, they earn to pay, they pay to keep living, and they repeat everything the following month. There is no room for expansion. There is no asset building. There is no real progress. There is only maintenance, sometimes well organized, sometimes a struggle, but maintenance nonetheless. Now, when they begin to set money aside with a clear purpose, something changes. Money stops being only a tool for consumption and also becomes a tool for construction. That difference seems small, but it is enormous. It is this difference that opens the door to a new kind of financial life. A life in which the salary serves not only to sustain the present, but also to finance the future. And note one important thing. Setting money aside without a purpose tends to fail. When a person does not know why they are saving, any momentary desire can seem more urgent. Any promotion, any invitation, any impulse gains force. That is why the money set aside needs to have a mission. It needs to have direction. It needs to represent something concrete: a reserve, protection, investment, freedom, growth. When there is clarity, discipline becomes stronger. The person stops seeing the saved amount as money left over and begins to see it as capital in preparation. That changes the way they think, feel, and act, because that money is not without purpose. It is positioning itself for the next level. It is being organized to move out of defense and into the field of construction. That is where saving fulfills its most powerful role. It makes investing possible. Without this stage, many people fall into traps. They try to invest without a reserve. They try to apply money that they may need at any moment. They try to grow without a foundation. And then when an unexpected event arises, they need to pull everything out in a hurry, sell poorly, interrupt plans, and return to zero. That generates frustration and makes investing seem confusing or dangerous, when in reality, the problem was the lack of structure before the application. That is why the order matters. First, the person learns not to spend everything. Then they build protection. Then they gain strength to invest with greater intelligence. That path may not seem exciting to those who prefer quick solutions, but it is what creates genuine strength. It forms a financial life that is less impulsive, less vulnerable, and far better prepared to grow. Whoever lives only in the logic of receiving and spending remains trapped in the effort of the month. Whoever learns to set money aside with purpose begins to build a bridge between what they earn today and the assets they wish to have tomorrow. And that bridge is precisely what is missing for so many good, hard-working, and competent people who live running without getting anywhere. Deep down, prospering as a salaried professional requires this mental shift. It requires understanding that saving is not the end point, but it is also not something small. It is the phase that transforms intention into possibility. It creates the initial capital, the breathing room, the discipline, and the structure needed to invest with greater safety and vision. Because whoever only receives and spends remains dependent on the next paycheck. But whoever begins to set money aside with a clear purpose truly begins the construction of a new reality. And when the person finally understands that saving is just the beginning, a new phase opens, the phase of making money work alongside the career. This is a point that completely changes the life of someone who lives on a salary. Because up to this point, the construction has been silent, learning to earn better, organizing income, protecting the future, creating a reserve, and setting money aside with purpose. But there comes a time when that money needs to move out of a waiting position and start producing. It is at that moment that a powerful principle is born. You do not need to abandon your job to start building multiple streams of income. Many people think in extreme terms. Either they believe they will be trapped by their salary forever, or they imagine they will only grow wealthy if they leave everything behind and start some grand adventure. But in most cases, the smartest construction happens in the middle ground. The person keeps their main career, continues to grow professionally, but begins to use part of what they earn to build small financial gears around their own life. And those gears, over time, start to turn alongside them. That is how income stops depending on a single point. Because depending on just one source is like supporting an entire house on a single column. While that column holds firm, everything seems fine. But if it cracks, the whole structure shakes. Now, when the person builds other income streams, even small ones at first, they begin to strengthen their own foundation. It is no longer just the salary holding everything up alone. Now there is support, there is reinforcement, there is expansion. These new sources can emerge in various forms. They can come from property, when a well-chosen asset generates rental income or appreciates over time. They can come from funds or investments that bring consistent returns. They can come from a vehicle being used for transportation services, from participation in small businesses, from assets that yield income without requiring full-time presence, or from side projects that draw on skills already developed in the main career. The point is not to copy someone else's path exactly. The point is to understand the logic. Your career can be the initial engine, but it should not be the only engine in your life forever. This vision brings maturity. The person stops thinking only about how much they earn per month and begins to think about how many streams of income they are building. They stop seeing money only as something to pay bills with and start seeing it as a silent worker that can be put into the field. Gradually, the money that used to only go out begins to come back with company. First, slowly, then with greater presence, and that changes everything. Because a well-built extra income brings not just more money, it brings relief, security, and the power of choice. Imagine the difference between someone who wakes up every day knowing that if the salary fails, everything stops, and someone who, beyond their career, has already built other streams. Even if those streams are not yet large, they already represent breathing room. They already represent movement. They already show that the financial life has stopped moving on a single leg. And here, there is a special beauty in this process. Many times, the person does not need to start big. They need to start consistently. One small asset today may seem modest, but with discipline, it can become 2, then 3, then an entire structure. What matters is moving out of the mindset of only working for money and into the mindset of building assets that work with you. The earlier this happens, the stronger the trajectory becomes, because then the career stops being just a place of effort and transforms into a lever. It funds the first steps, it finances the construction, it sustains the plan while the other streams are still small. And as time passes, what began as a complement can become an essential part of the overall assets. But there is yet another leap that few professionals see clearly. The market does not have to end at your city, your neighborhood, or your country. The world has changed, and whoever understands this early gains an enormous advantage. Today, a professional does not need to think only locally. They can become someone whose value is recognized in other markets, other companies, other environments, often without leaving home. And that begins with positioning. It begins with respected certifications, competencies that are recognized beyond the usual circle, and a broader mindset about one's own potential. Being a global player means stopping limiting your value to the physical space where you were born or where you started. It means understanding that if your skill solves real problems, it can find opportunities far greater than those in front of you right now. The internet has opened doors that before were available only to a few. Today, knowledge, services, consulting, management, education, technology, and many other areas can cross borders far more easily. That changes even the person's relationship with their own income. Because when someone begins to operate beyond the local market, they gain access not only to more opportunities, but also to stronger currencies, more advantageous contracts, and environments where their competence can be better compensated. It is like stepping out of a small plot of land and discovering that there is a vast field all around. Suddenly, the professional realizes they do not need to remain confined to the limits they had come to consider normal. But this expansion does not happen by chance. It requires preparation, it requires study, it requires serious qualification. It requires the courage to update oneself and learn to communicate with a larger market. It requires a digital presence, reputation, consistency, and vision. But for those who move in that direction, the result can be transformative. The career stops being merely local and gains reach. And when that happens, the capacity to generate wealth grows in an entirely different proportion. Deep down, it is a change of identity. The person stops seeing themselves as someone just trying to survive in their own environment and begins to see themselves as someone capable of competing, collaborating, and prospering in a wider arena. And that is not a distant dream. It is strategy. It is adaptation to the world as it truly is. And then we arrive at the closing of all of this, at a dimension that many people ignore when they talk about prosperity, but which makes an enormous difference in how wealth is built and sustained. The dimension of the heart. Because prospering is not just accumulating. It is not just earning, saving, and multiplying. There is something deeper that sustains a truly prosperous life, the ability to contribute, to be generous, and to understand that wealth without purpose may impress from the outside, but tends to feel empty from the inside. When a person develops principles of alliance, generosity, and contribution, they stop living with their hand always closed. They understand that the healthiest prosperity is not the kind that turns someone into a prisoner of their own money, but the kind that allows them to build, protect, serve, and bless other lives around them. That gives meaning to effort. It gives direction to growth. It brings balance to ambition, because there is no point in growing financially while at the same time becoming someone consumed by the fear of losing, by greed, or by the idea that everything exists only for personal benefit. A truly rich life is one in which money finds purpose in the hands of whoever manages it. It is one in which the person grows, but also contributes, advances, but also helps, conquers, but without losing the awareness that their journey can touch other people. And that brings us to one final, very practical reflection. Today, even simple and accessible tools can be transformed into new income streams when used with intelligence. One clear example of this is YouTube. Many people still look at that platform only as entertainment, but it can be much more than that. It can be a showcase, an asset, a channel of authority, a bridge to an audience, and a source of extra income. A professional can use the knowledge they already possess, the experience they have accumulated, and the vision they have developed to teach, guide, comment, share, and build an audience. And over time, that audience can transform into revenue, opportunities, partnerships, and new streams of earnings. What is most interesting is that this connects with everything that has been built up to this point. The career generates experience. Experience can become content. Content generates reach. Reach generates opportunities, and opportunities can become additional income. In other words, even what you have lived professionally can become an asset when it is organized in the right way. In the end, the great lesson is simple and powerful. The career can be the beginning, but it does not have to be the limit. The salary can be the foundation, but it should not be the ceiling. Saving protects, investing expands, multiple streams strengthen, global vision widens, generosity gives meaning. And when all of this comes together, financial life stops being merely a struggle to pay bills and truly begins to transform into a project of building wealth with purpose. If this message spoke to you, like the video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive the next pieces of content.